Hey y'all, it's Miss Roach. I just wanted to go over some review on adding and subtracting fractions before our benchmark test on Friday. When you're taking that test on Friday, be prepared to see several different questions using or requiring you to add and subtract fractions. You'll see questions that have it in a word problem context where you kind of have to read and figure out what you have to do. And also you're just going to see some where it's going to give you the fractions and just tell you to either add and subtract. We'll look at a couple different examples today, and hopefully you can practice using examples similar to these at home. The one thing I need you to remember when adding and subtracting fractions, I'm going to add a couple notes on here just for you to see. When adding or subtracting fractions, you have to have a common denominator. And if I just put a fraction on here for us to see as an example, say we were looking at 3/9. Okay, the number 3 is in the numerator. That's called the numerator. The 9 is in what you call the denominator place. And that's what I'm talking about. When you have two fractions and you're told to either add or subtract them, the numbers in this place have got to be the same. So if I was going to add something to the 3/9, say for example 2/3, before I added those fractions, I would have to find a common denominator before I could add. Let's look at an example. I found some questions that are coming from the same source your benchmark questions are coming from. So hopefully the wording of these problems will be similar to something that you'll see on the test. This question is asking you, which method shows the correct way to find the sum of 1/3 and 1/4? Well, that word or that term sum, that means we're going to add. Finding the sum is the answer of an addition equation. Okay, just looking at my answer choices, all of these choices here are showing, well, the first two have common denominators of 12. The last two options, they didn't find common denominators. Well, based off of what I just told you whenever I was looking at the SMART document here, that you have to have a common denominator. Okay, in this example, we can automatically eliminate C and D because they didn't use a common denominator in those answer choices. Okay, for the fractions 1/3 and 1/4, we're adding those two fractions. Let me write that here. 1/3 plus 1/4. Okay. We've talked about in class how to find a common denominator. Okay, finding a common denominator, you need to start by listing the multiples of each of these numbers. Multiples of 3 include 3, 6, 9, 12. I'm skip counting by the number 3. 15, 18, and 21. Okay, I'm going to see if that's enough. I'm going to jump ahead and I'm going to do the exact same thing for 4. I'm going to list multiples of 4, or skip count by the number 4. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. And those lists could keep on going. Okay, comparing my two lists, multiples of 3 and multiples of 4, I see a match, or one that is common amongst both of those. You're wanting to find the least common multiple, so staying as small as you can. And the first one that these guys have in common is the number 12. Okay, 12 is going to be my common denominator. What you have to do now is to rewrite your fraction equation using the new denominator 12. Okay. So what happened? 3 is now 12. 4 is now 12. Okay, now this part can get a little confusing, but as long as you stay with me and you try it with examples at home, you should have no problem doing this on your own. Okay, when 3 became 12, and I'm going to draw an arrow so we can follow this, we know that 3 times 4 is 12. Okay, so 3 times 4 gave me this new denominator of 12. Since I changed the 3 to 12, I've got to change this numerator here. Okay, since I multiplied the denominator by 4, I've got to multiply the numerator by 4 also. 1 times 4 is 4. So I did the exact same thing to the numerator as I did to the denominator, multiplying both of them by 4. Okay, now I need to change the second fraction, 1/4, to another fraction that has 12 as the denominator. This time I'm taking 4 and it has now become 12. And I have to think to myself, 4 times what is going to give me 12? Well, it's just the opposite of what we just did. 4 times 3 is 12. Okay, well, since I multiplied that denominator by 3, I have to do the same thing to its numerator. 1 times 3. 1 times 3 is 3. Now I have the fraction. I'm going to get a new page so we stay neat. 4 twelfths, 3 twelfths. 4 twelfths plus 3 twelfths. Now that our denominator is the same, all you have to do is add your numerators. 4 plus 3, 7. You do not add your denominators. Denominators stay the same. That'll be 7 twelfths. Okay, I'm going to go back to the test question and look at our answer choices. And right away, I see my choice here. 4 twelfths plus 3 twelfths equals 7 twelfths. That's exactly what we did. So I would choose A as my answer choice. Okay, real quick, let's look at one more example here. Okay. This is a word problem, but we're going to do it the same exact way. Hannah completed 3/4 of her homework on Saturday morning and 1/8 of it on Saturday night. How much homework has she completed? Well, I'm going to take the amount of homework that she completed in the morning and I'm going to add it to how much she did at night so we get that total. Those two fractions are 3/4 and 1/8. Let me get a new slide. 3/4 plus 1/8. Okay. If I were going to follow the exact same steps, I would start by listing multiples of my denominators. Multiples of 4 are 4, 8, 12, 16, and that list goes on. Multiples of 8 include 8, 16, 24, and that list goes on. Looking at my two list of multiples of 4 and multiples of 8, I see that they have 2 the same already, and I realize that these two numbers, if I kept my lists going, they would have several multiples that would be the same. Okay, I'm looking for the least common multiple or the smallest one. The smallest one that they have the same is that 8. Okay. If you notice this fraction 1/8, it already has 8 as the denominator, and that's going to save us some time when we start to solve this. We need to rewrite our fractions so that 8 is the denominator for both of them. Okay. Like I just said, this fraction that already has 1/8, it does not change at all. It stays the same. The only one that needs to change is this 3/4. The denominator 4 is now 8. Okay. 4 times what gives you 8? 4 times 2 is 8. Excuse me. 4 times 2 is 8, so I'm going to do the exact same thing to the numerator. 3 times 2. 3 times 2 is 6, okay? Whatever you do to your denominator, you have to do the exact same change to the numerator. Now I have the two fractions 6/8 plus 1/8. I've got common denominators, so all I have to do now is add my numerators across. 6 plus 1 is 7. Your denominator stays the same. And I have the answer 7/8. Let's go back to the problem, make sure that's one of our choices. Again, the correct answer choice would be A. The biggest thing I can tell you when adding and subtracting fractions is to remember to find a common denominator. You can't add or subtract until your denominators are the same. The easiest way to do that is listing the multiples of both denominators until you find a match in your list. It's easiest whenever you choose the least common one, the one that they have the same, that's the smallest, because it'll save you time simplifying later on. Alright, I encourage you to practice these at home. Have your mom and dad look over them, or maybe big sisters or brothers to check what you're doing, but you should be able to do this well on the test on Friday.